Two bodies lay on metal tables in a Mosul morgue. July 2003. The images went global within hours. Torn flesh, jagged entry wounds. These were the sons of Saddam Hussein, Uday and Qusay. Their end was a televised spectacle. Their beginning was a silent buildup of shadows. Uday Hussein was born in Baghdad on June 18, 1964. Qusay followed on May 17, 1966. At that time, their father was not yet the face of the nation. He was the man in the basement. Who was Saddam Hussein before the palaces? He was the architect of the Ba'ath Party's security apparatus. In 1968, he helped orchestrate the coup that seized total control of Iraq. He didn't take the title of president, not yet. He took the intelligence services instead. He stayed behind the scenes, building a mechanism of fear while his sons were still in primary school. The transition happened on July 16, 1979. Saddam pushed Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr aside. He officially became president of Iraq. The regime's true nature surfaced only days later. Saddam convened a meeting of the top party leadership. He sat on stage, smoking a cigar, while a manufactured list of traitors was read aloud. Men were pulled from their seats in tears. They were led outside and executed by their own colleagues. Saddam Hussein secured his throne with the blood of his inner circle. The purge solidified the hierarchy. Saddam Hussein transformed the Ba'ath Party into a cult of personality. His sons watched from the front row. They lived in fortified compounds. Baghdad and Tikrit became their private fortresses. High walls, steel gates, constant surveillance. Armed guards followed them into every room. Intelligence officers monitored every conversation. The brothers didn't just live in the palace, they studied it. They saw the mechanics of absolute control. How do you raise a successor in a police state? You show them the price of disloyalty. In Saddam's Iraq, fear replaced the law. Opponents didn't just lose their jobs, they lost their lives. The brothers witnessed the reward for obedience and the void left by enemies. Torture chambers weren't hidden in the basement. They were integrated into the state apparatus. Systematic, professional, cruel. The boys learned the primary rule of the regime. Power is not granted. It is maintained through the disappearance of the opposition. Saddam transformed the entire nation into a prison of 30 million people. Saddam's prison walls did not just hold enemies. They held the entire population. Fear was the only currency. Uday Hussein, the eldest, understood this early. He was loud. He was aggressive. He craved the flash of expensive suits and the roar of fast cars. How does a teenager learn to rule? By watching blood spill. Even in his youth, staff noted Uday's explosive violence. His younger brother Qusay chose a different mask. He stayed silent. He listened. He observed the mechanics of power from the shadows. The mask of stability shattered in September 1980. The Iran-Iraq War began. It lasted 8 years. 1 million people died or suffered injuries. The economy collapsed. Saddam needed total domestic submission to survive the front lines. Loyalty became a matter of biological survival. Uday stepped into the light. He took command of the Iraqi Olympic Committee and the National Football Association. Was it about sports? Never. It was about a new branch of the secret police. Athletes faced a simple choice: win or suffer. Those who lost were dragged to detention centers. The Al-Radwaniyah complex near Baghdad became a house of pain for runners and soccer players. Guards beat them with cables. They forced them into pits of raw sewage. Uday watched. Sports transformed into a public demonstration of absolute ownership. The regime did not want medals. It wanted broken men. In those years, the Al-Radwaniyah complex grew to cover nearly 30 square kilometers. Qusay Hussein chose the shadows. While Uday sought the cameras, Qusay mastered the levers of state security. He avoided public titles. Instead, he embedded himself within the Republican Guard. By the late 1980s, he controlled the Special Security Organization. This unit had one purpose: protecting Saddam from his own generals. The shadow play ended in August 1990. Iraq invaded Kuwait. A coalition of 34 nations responded with Operation Desert Storm. The Gulf War lasted 42 days. It ended in February 1991 after a ground campaign of only 100 hours. Saddam's military machine collapsed. How did the regime survive the aftermath? The defeat triggered immediate uprisings. In the south, Shia groups seized Basra and Najaf. In the north, Kurdish forces took the mountains. Saddam's rule looked fragile for the first time in 20 years. Hussein stepped into the light to save the throne. He coordinated the counteroffensive from the security headquarters. Tanks entered the southern suburbs. Attack helicopters hunted rebels in the marshes. The military shelled entire residential districts. The crackdown killed tens of thousands. Hussein personally oversaw the restoration of terror. Hussein did not just watch the rebellions, he crushed them. He personally coordinated the security apparatus to silence the south and the north. Order returned through mass executions, but outside the torture chambers, a different collapse began. The United Nations imposed the most stringent sanctions in modern history. Oil exports froze. The Iraqi dinar plummeted. In 1990, $1 equaled 1 dinar. By the mid-90s, it took 3,000 dinars to buy that same dollar. Did the regime feel the hunger? No, the palaces remained lit. Infrastructure lay in ruins from the bombings. Power grids failed daily. Clean water turned into a luxury, then a memory. Hospitals ran out of basic antibiotics and clean bandages. By 1995, reports estimated that 500,000 children had died due to malnutrition and preventable disease. Outside, mothers waited 10 hours in bread lines. Inside the presidential compounds, the Hussein family imported French silk and fine marble. While the population survived on flour rations mixed with sawdust, Uday and Qusay maintained fleets of luxury cars. The brothers oversaw the smuggling routes. They turned the black market into a private gold mine. They traded the nation's survival for gold-plated faucets. The sanctions did not weaken the inner circle. They liquidated the middle class. While Baghdad turned into a city of shadows, the elite built 50 new presidential palaces. Each brick cost more than a village's annual food supply. The regime lived in a parallel reality of absolute excess. While the Iraqi people traded their last possessions for flour, the palace walls shielded a different reality. Gold-plated faucets and imported cognac remained the standard. Luxury did not soften Uday, it fueled his instability. Was there a limit to his violence? The answer came in October 1988. During a high-profile party in Baghdad, Uday targeted Camel Hana Jagio. Jagio was more than a servant. He was Saddam's personal valet and food taster. He had also committed a fatal mistake in Uday's eyes. He introduced Saddam to Samira Shabandar. She became the leader's second wife. Uday viewed this as a betrayal of his mother. He approached Jagio in front of the assembled elite. He carried a battery-operated carving club. The assault was methodical. Uday beat the man to death while the guests watched in silence. The metallic scent of blood filled the room. No one moved to stop him. Saddam reacted with a brief display of justice. He imprisoned his son. He then exiled him to Switzerland for, quote, medical treatment. The exile lasted only months. Family blood proved thicker than the victims. By the mid-90s, Uday sought a different kind of power, the power of the word. He seized the media landscape. He founded the newspaper Babil. He took control of radio and television stations. The screen became his weapon. He used it to erase critics and broadcast the regime's cult of personality. But ink and airwaves were not enough. He needed boots on the ground. In 1995, he bypassed the regular army. He created the Fedayeen Saddam. The paramilitaries wore distinct black uniforms. They operated outside the law. They swore an oath of absolute loyalty not to Iraq, but to the person of the president. The group started with 10,000 men and grew into a force of nearly 40,000. The Fedayeen operated as a ghost army. Black uniforms, no traditional military command. They answered only to the Uday. 1996 changed the hierarchy of blood. Gunmen ambushed Uday's car in the streets of Baghdad. Did the bullets finish him? No. He survived multiple hits, but the damage was permanent. The flamboyant playboy became a paranoid invalid. He walked with a heavy limp. He leaned on a metal cane. Trust vanished from his circle. Revenge became his only metric for loyalty. While Uday spiraled into aggression, Qusay moved in silence. He was the methodical architect of the regime's safety. His focus remained internal. He monitored threats and neutralized coups before they breathed. Senior commanders noticed the shift. In October 2000, Saddam made it official. He named Qusay deputy commander of the armed forces. The signal was deafening for the Iraqi elite. Qusay was the chosen successor. Uday received no such promotion. The brothers' rivalry reached a terminal point. Uday still had his influence and his thugs, but Qusay controlled the structure. In a regime built on total surveillance, structure outweighed noise. Saddam had picked his heir. Structure held until the geopolitical landscape fractured. September 11, 2001, shifted Washington's sights to Baghdad. President George W. Bush issued the ultimatum. The accusation? Weapons of mass destruction. The charge? Violating United Nations resolutions. Tensions climbed throughout 2002. Inspectors returned to Iraqi soil. They found nothing, but the machine was already in motion. How many soldiers stood ready at the Kuwaiti border? 160,000. Coalition forces waited for the signal. On March 20, 2003, the invasion began. Airstrikes hit Baghdad. Tomahawk missiles carved through the skyline. Ground units bypassed cities to strike the heart of the regime. Iraqi defenses did not bend, they shattered. By April 9, 2003, the capital fell. In Ferdo Square, a crane hooked the neck of Saddam's bronze likeness. The statue hit the pavement in front of global news cameras. Saddam vanished into the shadows of the Sunni Triangle. Uday and Qusay abandoned their palaces and disappeared. The brothers vanished. Uday and Qusay abandoned the marble halls of Baghdad for the dusty basements of the Sunni Triangle. The U.S. military responded with one of the largest manhunts in modern history. Operation Desert Scorpion shifted focus. The target was no longer a state, but 3 men. To simplify the hunt for the rank and file, Central Command issued a deck of 55 playing cards. It was a kill list in the palm of a soldier's hand. Saddam Hussein was the ace of spades. Qusay, the quiet successor, was the ace of clubs. Uday, the volatile older brother, was the ace of hearts. Every private in the desert memorized those faces. Intelligence reports placed them in the north, moving between tribal safehouses. They skipped through Mosul and Tikrit, staying one step ahead of the Delta Force teams. Why was the hunt so urgent? Commanders believed the brothers were the glue holding the insurgency together. As long as they breathed, the Ba'athist ghost lived. The Pentagon decided to weaponize greed. They placed a bounty of $15 million on each brother's head. For Saddam himself, the price was $25 million. In a collapsed economy, that was more than a fortune. It was an exit strategy. By July 2003, the pressure reached a breaking point. A tip came in from Mosul. The informant didn't want a revolution. He wanted the $30 million. The $30 million bounty outweighed tribal loyalty. In July 2003, the hunt for the brothers narrowed to a single house in Mosul. The target was a villa in the Al-Falah neighborhood. It belonged to Nawaf al-Zaydan, a businessman with deep connections to the regime. Al-Zaydan contacted the Americans with a precise location. He claimed he discovered the identity of his guests and feared the fallout. Others pointed to the reward money. Motivation mattered less than the coordinate. Did the brothers know they were sold? They remained inside as the perimeter closed. The scale of the response was asymmetric. Major General David Petraeus moved the 101st Airborne Division into the streets. 200 soldiers surrounded the block. Special operations teams took the lead. Bradley fighting vehicles blocked the intersections. Humvees provided heavy cover from every corner. Above the villa, the air grew thick with the sound of rotors. 2 OH-58 Kiowa helicopters hovered, tracking movement through thermal sensors. Snipers deployed on neighboring rooftops, stabilizing their rifles. The initial order was clear: capture, not kill. Soldiers moved toward the entrance with loudspeakers. They expected a surrender. They found a fortress. 200 men waited for a signal to breach. July 22nd. They died in a hail of lead. But the war for their bodies began 48 hours later on television screens. In a country built on state-manufactured lies, Iraqi citizens demanded a visual receipt. The Pentagon hesitated. Officials weighed Islamic burial traditions against the tactical need for proof. They feared a backlash. They feared the images would fuel the insurgency instead of choking it. Was the risk worth the psychological blow? Military leaders argued that without photos, the myth of the invincible brothers would live on. Resistance fighters would claim Uday and Qusay were still leading the charge. To kill the movement, they had to kill the ghost. July 24, 2003. The Pentagon authorized the release. Mortuary specialists in a Baghdad morgue began the technical reconstruction. They cleaned the skin. They applied thick layers of cosmetic wax to fill the craters left by high-caliber rounds. Close-up on Uday's face. The camera lingers on the unnatural waxy sheen, covering reconstructed jawlines. His beard is trimmed. His eyes are closed. Then, the shot pulls back to an old television set in a crowded Iraqi cafe. Men lean forward, eyes fixed on the flickering glass. The image was a manufactured product. Professionals used lighting and makeup to make the corpses recognizable, yet the underlying trauma remained visible. Bullet entry points and shrapnel scars broke through the heavy foundation. Al Jazeera began the broadcast. In 2003, their satellite footprint reached over 30 million households. The reach was total. The images moved from the briefing room to every tea house and living room in the Middle East. In Baghdad and the South, small crowds gathered. People stared at the screens in silence, then erupted into celebration. For these families, the pixels on the screen represented the first tangible sign of justice. In Tikrit, the reaction shifted. No cheering, no gunfire in the air. Men watched the screens, turned off the power, and walked into the dark. Silence took hold in the streets of Tikrit. Amateur cameras captured what the makeup artists tried to hide. A leaked videotape hit the airwaves. It was not a Pentagon product. The frame shakes. You hear the rhythmic hum of morgue refrigeration units. No official lighting, no staged angles. Why did the public demand such brutal detail? In a region fueled by decades of state propaganda, the Iraqi people only trusted the sight of blood. The footage shows the medical facility from the inside. Staff in stained scrubs wash the bodies of Uday and Qusay. The camera moves close. It lingers on the entry wounds. The official photos showed reconstructed faces. This video shows the depth of the trauma. High-velocity rounds from the 327th Infantry Regiment had shattered bone and tissue. The Pentagon denied the leak. But Iraq in 2003 was a sieve of contractors, translators, and local workers. The tape reached the offices of Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. Millions of households in Jordan, Syria, and the Gulf states watched the same grainy frames. Satellite dishes on dusty rooftops in Tikrit pulled the signal from the sky. Technology had outpaced the sensors. Family members eventually claimed the remains. On August 2, 2003, the brothers returned to Tikrit. They were buried near the family plots under heavy guard. Soldiers lowered the wooden coffins into the earth. The white shrouds did not end the uncertainty. Even the grainy footage from the autopsy table failed to silence the streets of Basra. In a country built on mirrors, the truth was just another version of a lie. Baghdad, Mosul, Tikrit. Within hours, the rumors outpaced the official reports. Why did the population refuse to believe the American commanders? The answer lay in decades of state-controlled theater. For 30 years, Baghdad State Television served as a factory for fiction. If the regime said it was raining, the people looked for a drought. Distrust was a survival mechanism. The Iraqi public lived in a psychological fortress. Suspicion moved faster than satellite signals. In the tea houses of the South, men whispered about tunnels. They spoke of a secret network stretching toward the borders of Syria and Jordan. The brothers had escaped. The Americans had killed ghosts. This paranoia was not baseless. Saddam Hussein had cultivated the phenomenon of doubles for decades. Body doubles stood on balconies. Body doubles saluted at parades. They were the regime's ultimate security layer. If the father could be in 3 places at once, the sons could surely survive a single raid. To the Iraqi mind, the photos were just another stage play. The heavy makeup on the corpses looked like a mask. The angles seemed staged. Pro-regime loyalists dismissed the images as a desperate American propaganda stunt. In a society deformed by 30 years of total censorship, words had zero value. Only the physical presence of death could break the spell. The public demanded a level of visual evidence that bypassed the screen. Iraqis needed to see the bullet holes with their own eyes. The forensic verification followed a strict protocol. Forensic pathologists use medical science to silence conspiracy theories once and for all. Identification began with biometrics. Technicians compared high-resolution dental X-rays of the upper and lower jaws against captured Iraqi medical records. The matches were perfect. Both brothers had distinct dental work recorded years before the invasion. Uday was 39 years old. Qusay was 37. Visual identification followed. Facial recognition software analyzed bone structure and orbital distances. Despite the trauma of the gun battle, the digital markers aligned with known photographs of the brothers. Then came the definitive proof. Military labs extracted DNA samples from the remains. They compared the genetic material against verified samples from the Hussein family. The results left zero margin for error. The 2 most wanted men in Iraq after the dictator himself were dead. The entire identification process, from extraction to final confirmation, took exactly 24 hours. 48 hours before the bodies reached the morgue, the target house in Mosul was a fortress. Inside were 4 men: Uday, Qusay, 14-year-old Mustafa, and a lone bodyguard. They had shifted furniture, stockpiled ammunition, and braced for a siege. The confrontation began at 10 in the morning. U.S. forces surrounded the perimeter and issued a final command to surrender. The response was a wall of lead. Automatic fire erupted from the windows, pinning down American troops instantly. How do you breach a concrete villa defended by men who refuse to live? A 6-hour firefight followed. Soldiers deployed machine guns and grenade launchers, but the stone walls held. One attempt to storm the interior failed under a hail of bullets. The occupants knew they were cornered. They chose to fight to the last round. By mid-afternoon, U.S. commanders escalated the engagement. They brought in the heavy armor. A Bradley fighting vehicle took position and prepared the TOW anti-tank missile system. Rockets slammed into the second floor. The engineering of the TOW is precise, a shaped charge designed to punch through steel armor. Inside a residential room, the detonation is absolute. The temperature of the blast reaches levels high enough to melt concrete and vaporize glass. The continuous roar of heavy machine guns drowned out any screams. 10 missiles hit the structure in rapid succession. Upper floors pancaked. Support beams snapped. The house was dismantled piece by piece until the firing from within finally stopped. The smoke cleared to reveal a skeleton of twisted rebar and powdered stone. 14-year-old Mustafa died in the rubble. He was the last one breathing. For some, he was a child. For the Pentagon, he was the final combatant in a 6-hour siege. Did the ends justify the means? The Geneva Convention prohibits the public display of bodies of prisoners or the dead. It demands dignity. The United States chose efficiency over protocol. Amnesty International immediately challenged the decision. They questioned the morality of turning a morgue into a media circus. The disparity in force was absolute. 1 teenager and 3 adults against an entire army division. 22. That is how many TOW anti-tank missiles hit the residential house. Each one designed to punch through heavy armor. Against brick and human bone, they were overkill. This was not a police raid. It was a localized war of annihilation. The tactical result was cold and measurable. U.S. commanders noted a sharp drop in insurgent activity in the following days. The symbols of the old regime were physically erased, the immediate threat neutralized. Soldiers cleared the perimeter as the heavy transport moved the remains. Drawing from this brief window of calm, the military shifted its focus to the next target. In the Sunni Triangle, the number of improvised explosive device attacks hit a temporary low. The death of his sons broke the final seal of the dictator's will. Within 6 months, the Lion of Babylon was being flushed out of the earth like a cornered animal. Commanders knew the truth. As long as Saddam remained free, the insurgency had a heartbeat. Intelligence focused on the tribal knots of Tikrit, specifically the villages clinging to the banks of the Tigris River. Captured officials and local informants finally began to talk. The hunt received a name: Operation Red Dawn. Planners took the title from a 1984 film about partisan warfare. The 4th Infantry Division moved toward the town of Ad-Dor, 15 kilometers south of Tikrit. The night of December 13, 2003, soldiers raided 2 sites, Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. The search narrowed to a patch of dirt near a mud hut. A soldier noticed a piece of rug. Beneath it, a foam plug. Then, a concrete lid. The lid came off. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness of a vertical shaft. The light hit a face. A man stared back, blinking and dazed. The smell hit the soldiers first. A thick, suffocating stench of damp earth, unwashed skin, and rotting food. The spider hole was barely a coffin. A narrow bunker, bricks, dirt, and a single ventilation pipe. He did not fire a shot. U.S. soldiers hauled him out by his arms. He looked like a beggar. His beard was long and matted with gray. His eyes were hollow. The contrast was absolute. The man who sat on golden thrones now stood shivering in the mud, covered in the filth of his own hiding place. On his belt sat a Glock 18 pistol. He never reached for it. Medical personnel performed the examination on the spot. The man pulled from the dirt reached the gallows in 3 years. Identification happened fast. DNA confirmed the match. The Lion of Babylon was now a medical subject on a stretcher. His security network lay in ruins. For decades, the Special Security Organization and the Republican Guard held Iraq in a vice. Qusay had managed the secrets. Uday had managed the fear. Their deaths months earlier in Mosul shattered the inner circle. Commanders fled. Loyalists turned informants. The system didn't just break, it evaporated. Who stood in the dock? In 2005, the Iraqi Special Tribunal opened its doors. The Coalition Provisional Authority built the court. To many Sunnis, it lacked legitimacy. To the Kurds and Shias, it was overdue. The central charge: the 1982 massacre in Dujail. 148 Shia men and boys murdered after a failed assassination attempt. The trial was a media spectacle. Saddam argued. He shouted. He remained the dictator in his own mind. But the evidence was cold. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty. December 30th, 2006, dawn in Baghdad. The execution chamber was cold. Guards recorded the final moments on cell phones. Before the end, they wrapped a thick hemp rope around his neck. The trapdoor opened. The rope around Saddam's neck didn't end the war, it unchained it. The removal of the dynasty's heirs created a void that statecraft could not fill. Who filled the vacuum? Former intelligence officers and radicalized clerics stepped into the ruins of the Ba'athist state. Order collapsed. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a Jordanian militant, turned the insurgency into a religious slaughterhouse. His organization, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, weaponized sectarian hate. Car bombs ripped through Shia neighborhoods. Snipers hunted U.S. patrols in the alleys of Mosul. The numbers tell the cost of the quick victory. Between 2006 and 2007, the conflict reached a bloody peak. Tens of thousands died. The removal of 2 men did not dismantle the machinery of violence. It merely changed the operators. The images of Uday and Qusay's reconstructed faces remained the only tangible proof of the old world's end. Military officials cited necessity. Human rights groups cited a lapse into medieval optics. The Pentagon eventually classified the display as a successful operation of psychological warfare. Global media networks broadcast the corpses of the brothers as the final visual evidence of the regime's fall since 1979.